In Iran. Good evening, Roger Cilmpson. The Wren government today announced tougher penalties for drug traffickers in New South Wales as a result of the Woodward Royal Commission report on drug trafficking. Mr Wren announced that the maximum jail term for convicted traffickers would be increased to 25 years and the fines raised to $200,000. The impact of the report has been felt most strongly in Griffith, the town named in the report as the headquarters of a Calabrian marijuana syndicate. Mark Suler went to Griffith today to check the feeling in the town and to try to talk to some of the drug bosses. He met with a wall of silence.
The saga that began with the death of Donald Mackay and the tireless efforts of his wife Barbara to find the truth is not quite over yet for the residents of Griffith. Still among their community are those said to be connected with the so-called honoured Italian Society, named as the major producer of marijuana in New South Wales and in connection with the death of Donald Mackay. When talks of a mafia-style society was just rumour, those men, the Sergi brothers and Robert Trimboli and Frank Barbaro, were regarded suspiciously but tolerated in Griffith. But now the town wants them out.
We look forward to the pursuit of all the recommendations of Justice Woodward. We must remember that a prominent citizen died over this matter and died against his will. In other words, reading that report, let's not mince matters, the man's been murdered. And it's cost a man his life, this report. It had to come to that to get the Royal Commission off the ground.
So you say it's got to be concluded with charges and action before it's all resolved?
That's exactly right. It must be completed. It must be done just right. And this crosses party lines. You can forget about party politics. This thing started when the previous government was in. And it's up to this government now, because they're in power, to carry it to its logical conclusion and remove this cancer from Griffith.
Whether they know that they're no longer tolerated here or not, none of those so far accused wanted to defend themselves today. It's said, of course, that the honoured society doesn't speak to the law. Well, apparently it doesn't speak here either, because already here at the Sergi winery today, one television crew has had its camera smashed and another has been threatened with 2 Alsatian dogs. When we tried, the only answer we could get was, the Sergi brothers aren't at home. Then we tried another of those named by the Commission, Robert Trimboli, who's said to have flown back to Griffith from Sydney last night. When we arrived at his house, he was working under the bonnet of his car. But as soon as we pulled up, he and the rest of his family ran inside. None of those said to be in the honoured society have been charged as yet with the murder of Donald Mackay. Some have faced drug charges before. Now, however, they must know that the pressure is on, not only from the state government, but also from many of the residents they've lived with, including some of their own colleagues in the Italian community.
The release of the Woodward report has also led to a reopening of the inquiry into the actions of detectives Ellis, Borthwick and Robbins, the 3 policemen named as having been involved with the marijuana growers. The Police Commissioner, Mr Jim Lees, said today he was concerned at the way the report had condemned the 3 men.
The position is that any policeman in bother does concern me, disappoints me, because we have a good police force of which I'm very proud, and I like to try and keep it that way.
The report does recommend inquiring into the action of the men. It also says to look at the financial affairs of the 3 policemen. Will you be doing both of, will the police department be doing both of those?
Put it this way, we certainly continue the investigations into the 3 of those men. Whether or not we have the power to look at their financial dealings, I'm not too sure at this stage. But I've already assigned Detective Inspector Fife, or reassigned him to the investigation with police from the Internal Affairs Branch, and they will be doing a very thorough investigation into the whole matter.
The harsher penalties for trafficking were just part of the state government's response to the recommendations made in the Woodward report. John Flower has more on that.
The Premier has lost no time in taking action on the report. He announced today that Mr Justice Woodward is to go to Bangkok for discussions with Thai authorities. In addition, the Premier said he'd been in touch with Mr Anthony, the acting Prime Minister, to discuss the establishment of a National Crime Intelligence Unit to combat drug trafficking. Today, Mr Wren outlined details of the 2 moves.
Mr Justice Woodward will be having talks with appropriate Thai government officials with a view to advising us as to what is the proper procedure or mechanism for setting up the Australian Law Enforcement Agency, which he contemplates in his report.
And one of the recommendations was the setting up of a National Crime Intelligence Unit. What sort of timetable were you looking for in cooperation with the federal government for the establishment of that unit?
Well, we've adopted this recommendation in principle. We wish to explore the establishment of such a unit with the federal government as soon as practicable, with a view to setting it up as soon as possible, because the problem is not confined within the borders of any one state. It's a national problem, so the concept of a joint Commonwealth state system seems to be a very sensible.
Melbourne homicide detectives are investigating another brutal murder which they believe may be linked with the trans-Tasman drug industry. Mike Barrett reports.
The badly decomposed body was found 8 days ago just off this logging track near Kinglake West. At first it was believed there were no suspicious circumstances, but a post-mortem has now revealed that the body had multiple stab wounds to the back. The dead man had a knife concealed in a shirt sleeve, and police believe he was armed when he came up here for a meeting. They also believe the man was a New Zealander, as the clothes he was wearing could only be purchased in New Zealand. As yet, they haven't ruled out any connection between the finding of the dead man and the New Zealand drug ring.
It is a question we are looking at, the same as anything else. We have ascertained that he was wearing clothing that was sold exclusively in New Zealand, and this links us to New Zealand somewhat, and I think that one obvious thing we'd look at is drug-related murders.
There was a knife found on the body. Was that the murder weapon?
No, it was not the murder weapon, but obviously he was armed with a carving knife.
What does that lead you to believe?
That he had possibly had a meeting with somebody arranged, and he necessitated him being armed.
What inquiries are being pursued at the moment?
Well, we're asking the public to try and assist identification of the body. At this stage, we can't do much more until he is in fact identified.
Business and Consumer Affairs Minister Wal Fife, whose controversial Federal Narcotics Bureau has been disbanded, was the subject of a full-scale attack by the Labor Party in federal Parliament today. After directing every question to Mr Fife in question time, the opposition moved a censure motion against him for what they called his inept handling of the Federal Narcotics Administration. Laurie Wilson reports.
The opposition leader, Mr Hayden, led the attack on Mr Fife in Parliament today. He said that the Williams report on drugs, which led to the disbanding of the Narcotics Bureau, was a scathing indictment of the minister's incompetence. He said Mr Fife had known for more than a year that there were serious shortcomings in the Bureau's operations, yet he had defended the Narcotics Bureau and had presided over it being given increased powers. Tonight, Mr Fife said that while he had defended the Bureau, it was the right thing to do at the time.
I had a responsibility which I believe I discharged properly to defend the law enforcement arm of the Commonwealth.
You would do it again?
I would do it again in the same situation. One must defend the law enforcement arms, and if there's a deficiency, take some remedial action. We took that remedial action. We established a Royal Commission to tell us what we ought to do, what changes ought to be made. We knew as a government at the end of 1977 that some major changes ought to be made. But we needed advice, and we needed that advice to be tested in an appropriate way.
More news in just a moment. The situation there has become increasingly complicated and dangerous. The government of Prime Minister Barzaghan has resigned, and all power now rests in the hands of the country's religious leaders. There are unconfirmed but probably correct reports that Iranian oil workers have stopped 80% of the country's crude exports. President Carter has conferred with the National Security Council about the Iranian situation twice within the past 24 hours, and the US State Department has warned American companies in Iran to evacuate their staff. Normal consular protection is no longer available to American citizens residing in that country as the siege of the United States Embassy in Tehran continues. The students holding the embassy have threatened to kill their hostages in the event of any possible intervention. This satellite report received some hours ago indicates that there's a very short fuse on the powder keg.
Fervent crowds continue to demonstrate outside the seized U.S. Embassy in Tehran, where 100 hostages are being held by Islamic students. Inside, the students issued a blunt warning to the U.S. government. If any action, military or non-military, is taken to secure the release of the hostages, they will be killed. The students said the embassy was the spying and plotting center of America. They called on the Iranian people to track down the embassy's chargé d'affaires, who was not in the compound when it was stormed last Sunday. In Washington, the death threat took the State Department by surprise, but a spokesman emphasized that the safety of the hostages remained the highest priority. The spokesman went on to say he expected the Iranian government to honor its commitment to have the hostages freed. But that solution dissolved when the provisional government, headed by Prime Minister Mehdi Barzaghan, was taken over by Iran's Council of Clergy. Barzaghan's civilian government, always weak, began to teeter when, amidst the current wave of virulent anti-American feeling, it was revealed he had met last week with U.S. National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski. Finally, unable to break the clergy's support for the embassy takeover, Barzaghan resigned. Just what will happen in the embassy stalemate is unclear. The Americans have few options, and with the students' death threat, they will have to tread even normal diplomatic avenues very carefully.
A startling survey of country road accidents shows that far too many people are ignoring safety precautions for their children. Ray Sinclair has this exclusive report.
When the department launched a massive and expensive media campaign a few months ago, there was good reason. In the previous year, 1,500 kids under 8 were killed or injured on our state roads. But that campaign didn't catch every ear. The new report shows the astonishing fact that of 639 kids under 8 in country accidents, only 35 were wearing restraints. Apparently, country drivers just ignore the risk.
Well, it certainly does look like that. That's only a 5% usage, whereas here in Sydney, we've got 33% usage if we go out in the streets and measure it. I imagine it's because child restraints simply aren't available in the shops in the country centres.
And the shops won't even stock them?
Well, I've done a look around in Armidale and Wagga and a few places, and it's very hard to find child restraints in the shops.
The department has been shocked into appealing directly to country councils, doctors and nursery schools to get the message across. But more astoundingly, all parents are generally ignoring the 6 to 8-year-olds.
That's correct. We've, as you say, shown that there is a big increase in usage, but it's primarily up to 5 years of age. Now, that's a good thing. That's an improvement over what it was, but the 6 to 8-year-olds just seem to be floating around unrestrained.
Dave Herbert, now a grandfather, isn't at all happy about safety-conscious parents who leave their kids unprotected.
Well, I think probably they're largely ignorant of the dangers and of the simple benefits that can be given their children, how simple it is to provide these devices, and perhaps they're just careless and neglectful.
This dummy cost more than $2,000. It's a very expensive way of demonstrating how to save your child's life. The question, especially for you country people and long-distance holiday makers, is $15 for this cushion too high a price for your child?
Public Transport Commission tradesmen today decided to maintain the industrial bans which caused disruptions to interstate, interurban and suburban train services. The claim by the tradesmen for a $20 a week pay rise went before the Arbitration Commission again this morning, but the hearing was adjourned to let the union's Wages Committee consider a new set of PTC proposals. The proposals were rejected, and a union spokesman says it's now up to the Commission to seek a further meeting. Moneylenders with rates as high as 193% are just some of the assortment of dubious characters revealed in the latest report from the New South Wales Department of Consumer Affairs. Complaints about used car dealers again topped the list, but there was also a big increase in the number of complaints about doctors. There was a lady who fell and broke her wrist, but when the plaster was removed, the wrist was discovered to have been improperly set. The doctor said he couldn't straighten it unless she fell down again. There was also the case of the woman who became pregnant 4 months after being sterilised. By the way, Consumer Affairs says that very few of the complaints it receives are frivolous. You're watching 7 National News.
Good evening. In Sydney today, race 5 was the first leg of the daily double. Here's the finish with 2KY race caller Ian Craig.
Falou, he's giving her plenty of galloping room. She's about 8 deep as they turn, where Bright Girl got a beautiful run and slipped to the lead. Bright Girl in the stretch at the 250, a length on Drift Out. Ballyfaloo is coming home very, very fast now, and Ballyfaloo immediately claimed Bright Girl. In third position, Drift Out. Ballyfaloo, ridden for dear life by Langby, is coming away from Bright Girl, Drift Out, and flying home Scouted Affair, but the favourite's home, Ballyfaloo.
11 to 8 and favourite Ballyfaloo, ridden by Kevin Langby. 8 to 1. And 5 to 1 Drift Out. Well, Roy Higgins pulled the wrong rein when he passed up the mount on Hyperno in the Cup, and Tony Marnie did the same in the second leg at Canterbury this afternoon when he rode Good Vibrations in preference to the favourite Irish Slipper.
As they swing, Irish Slipper gets the run to go. Masho in third place, Winning Red, and then a gap to Lachlan, dropping off, but Irish Slipper cruised up to Masho, takes the lead. Winning Red's after Irish Slipper, and Good Vibrations coming home well, but Irish Slipper in front, he spurted away. Irish Slipper about 2 Good Vibrations and Winning Red, and Irish Slipper's going to be untroubled. Irish Slipper has won it handily from Good Vibrations and Winning Red.
Bad luck, Tony, but Wayne Harris rode the winner. Irish Slipper, 11 to 4 favourite, 7 to 1 Good Vibrations, and 9 to 1 Winning Red. The Canterbury Extra Double this afternoon, numbers 1 and 8, paid $31.90. Extra Trifecta Combination, 8, 6 and 1, returned $5,336.90. The Daily Double was pretty thin, $3.90 for numbers 5 and 1, while the main Trifecta, 1, 8 and 10, paid $319.60. And at the Kyneton Cup meeting in Victoria, the Daily Double, 6 and 10, paid $286.50, and the Trifecta on the Cup, 6, 1 and 10, returned $900.90. England cricket captain Mike Brearley always seems to have something to complain about. This time, justifiably perhaps, he's not too happy about having to pay for the use of lights during a special training session at the Sydney Cricket Ground tomorrow night and again on Friday. Only one of his players has played under lights, while the majority of the West Indian and Australian players are used to night cricket.
The English squad trained at the SCG number 2 today despite the damp conditions. There are 3 new faces in the lineup: Graham Dilley, Wayne Larkins and Peter Willey. Dilley's an exciting prospect. He's a tall pace bowler with a high action. Larkins is an opening batsman, while Willey's an all-rounder. He's seen here bowling to the evergreen Geoffrey Boycott. One of the more exciting players in the English lineup is Ian Botham, and he told me today that he's keen to face Lilly and Tomo again.
I've always rated Dennis very highly. I think he's one of the finest new ball bowlers there's been. Tomo's obviously a great test bowler, a great bowler, full stop, so yes, it'll be good to face these guys.
I suppose you'd be the man to ask this question. Who would you rate the best at the moment, Hogg, Lilly or Thompson?
Well, I wouldn't mind them to choose from one of the 3. You guys are lucky you can choose from one of the 3. I'll take anyone you don't want.
What about the situation you're a bit worried about playing under the lights?
No, actually, I think most of us are looking forward to it. I certainly am anyway.
And the white ball?
Yeah, it's new and I'm looking forward to it. It's different. Very good.
Meantime, in the 6th test in India, Australia's in real trouble, battling to force a draw with a day and a half left to play. At lunch on the 4th day of the test, Australia 4 wickets down for 154 in the second innings, chasing India's first innings total of 8 for 458 declared. Kim Hughes and Alan Border made something of a fight back in the morning session before Hughes was dismissed for 80. That's all in sport. Here's Roger.
Thank you, Gary, and Mike Bailey has, I hope, some improving weather conditions for us in just a moment.
Your plant hire or interstate transport problems can be solved by contacting Graham Stevenson's in Lanham Road, Griffith, or phone 624766.
Pleasant day, and I'm talking about the southern inland of New South Wales. Along the coast, certainly some rain, and extending further inland in the part of the state. Indeed, at the moment in Sydney at 17 degrees, it's warmer to the nearest degree than it has been or was in the 9 to 3 period today. A lot of cloud, as the satellite photograph shows, in the eastern part of the state, and also some more moving in from the west. But in between the two, we can look to something of a break tomorrow. A reasonable fall of rain to report for a change here at Scone, 53 millimetres for the 24 hours to 9 this morning, and the heavier concentration of rain during the 9 to 3 period then was mostly along the mid-north coast region, with the exception of Broken Hill, where they had 4 millimetres and in fact topped for the 9 to 3 period. So an interesting area of rain spreading quite a bit inland there in the north of the state, where Walgett had 33 degrees as the maximum today, and Perisher Valley last night the minimum 1 degree. In Sydney, as I said, not much of a temperature range, 15 to 16 degrees, 9 and 3 at least, that was the maximum, at 7 below the average for this 7th day of November. 14 to 17 the range at Liverpool, again not very wide, and 14 to 16 at Richmond, much the same. 0.8 of a millimetre of rain in Sydney between 9 yesterday and 9 this morning. It's been very much drizzle type rain, very slow in falling, but 4 millimetres on the board for Pymble, also a couple of other north suburbs including Turra. 23 was today's pollution reading, and that was in the low range once again, although up a little on yesterday. Taking a look at the satellite photograph from Macquarie University in detail, we have the cloud hanging around the New South Wales coast still. It's a trough system actually in the north of the state, which is still possible, or capable of producing 1 or 2 isolated thunderstorms. And coming through from the west, yet more cloud. But as I mentioned, in between the two, we should be able to look to a break. This other stuff, incidentally, hasn't brought any major falls of rain as yet to the South Australia, Western Australia area, but as it moves into New South Wales, there is a chance it will bring at least some light rain, more likely into the early part of Friday. But for the moment, we'll have a continuing south to southeasterly airstream onto the coast overnight, but some of the shower activity should start to contract to the north tomorrow. This high, of course, is still well down to the south, but we can look to some sunny breaks as we get to tomorrow afternoon. Taking a look at the forecast, it's very similar to that for today. A few showers, mainly night and morning, and then in the afternoon tomorrow we should indeed see those sunny breaks. The winds will be moderate from the south, initially turning more to the east later in the day with slight season to low swell, and the temperatures 14 to 20 for the city and 13 to 20 at Liverpool. And that's the rather bleak start to the day tomorrow, but we can look to some clearing later on. Roger.
Thank you, Mike. That certainly sounds a bit better. Meantime, for 7 National News, Roger Cilmpson. Good night.
MTN9, in conjunction with the Department of Agriculture and the Bureau of Meteorology, now present the Black Spot Warning Service. Black spot has not been active, so curative action need not be taken at the moment. However, normal routine sprays should be applied if you are following a protective program. Get the most out of this service. Consult your local horticulturist.